we tend to overestimate how much people care or think about us.
Yes. 100%.
Right? Is
100%.
that you think people are fixated on your missteps or,
Yeah.
what you said in that meeting, when in fact it's so much less than you
Yeah.
imagine in
They're
your
worried about their own
mind.
stuff.
They're everyone's the center of their own
Yeah.
story,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And so if you think that, then why not say the thing, right?
Yeah.
Why not put that, you
Nothing
take
to
a risk?
lose.
Why not? We
Yeah.
really have very little to lose.
Exactly. Welcome to Hyphen Nation. I'm here with my friend Faye Iosotaluno. I hopefully I said that right.
You
Faye, is
did.
that an Indonesian last name? Like, what is the
Oh,
origin?
it is not an Indonesian last name, though. I've heard, is it Greek? Is it Italian? Is it Japanese? So, my father immigrated to the US and as part of it decided, he could come up with a last name. And of all last names, that's what he came up with. So it does not have Indonesian roots necessarily, but it does a little bit, aesthetically perhaps like hearken to
Yeah.
some Indonesian names. But my sister and I are the only Isotalunos left, and we only have daughters, so
That it
we
ends
might
with
we might be it.
yeah. Oh wow. But your parents immigrated from where then?
Both my parents were born in Indonesia. My mother moved to Taiwan, and so she grew up in Taiwan. My father grew up in Indonesia, ethnically Chinese, immigrated to the U.S. and then met here in the U.S. And I was born and raised in Los Angeles.
Oh wow. So you and your sister grew up in LA. Did you grow up speaking Mandarin and like because your dad was from Indonesia? No, you just spoke English mostly at home?
No, we did speak Mandarin. I would imagine Mandarin is probably my first language.
Oh wow.
Yeah, my parents spoke English, but really not at home. And I did my best to keep up. I went to Chinese school on the weekends, through elementary school until I protested enough that they allowed me to stop. Um, I even went on Love Boat to
Oh.
Taipei. Yes, the summer
What year
between
was
my
that?
freshman and 1999, the summer between my freshman and
Oh
sophomore
wow. I
year.
went the year before you did. We could have
Yeah,
could have
we
met the year
could have
before.
had
Who
we just
knows?
gone. I know, I know. Um, but I was really lucky, I think. I actually, grew up in a town called West Covina here in
Mm,
Los Angeles, a
I know it.
suburb.
Yeah.
Do you know it? The
Yeah.
only two reasons why I feel like anybody would know it is one, Jason Jombie went to my high school, South
Oh.
Hills High School. So if you're into
Yeah.
baseball, and two, there was a show called Crazy Ex-Girlfriend
Oh,
that, for
that's right.
whatever
West
reason,
Covina High School.
was based in West
That's
Covina.
right. That's right. My friend from West Covina has mentioned that before. So yes.
Yeah,
You didn't know a
yeah.
Dave Shee by any chance, did you? You went to UCLA?
No, I
Okay.
don't. No,
So,
no, no.
but yes.
Yeah, but it's,
S-
it was a fairly diverse community.
Yeah.
So I had Asian friends, I had Mexican friends, I had black friends, white friends. Um, I do think that the Asians kind of stuck together. My mom, when she immigrated, some of her siblings immigrated as well, and so we had family nearby. So
Mm,
our weekends were spent at somebody's house while the parents were playing mahjong. The kids were all together doing whatever crazy things we were
yeah.
doing and running around town.
Yeah.
Um, and so I had a lot of, I think, community and culture around me, which I'm really thankful for.
And you said you went to Chinese school growing up too then?
I did go to
Okay,
Chinese
so
school every
you had a community,
Saturday.
yeah, yeah, same. Watching Saved by the Bell or other stuff. I couldn't watch. I was like going to Chinese school, and so I think I know a lot of people assume growing up. I grew up in New Jersey, so like people don't assume I grew up with many Asians, but everyone assumes if you grow up in LA, oh, you don't know what it's like to deal with racism because it's all Asians. I'm like, well, maybe in like Irvine or San Gabriel Valley, but in a place like West Covina and others where I believe it's further inland.
It is.
It's much more diverse and like Asian population wise, it's not like 50% like some people think.
No,
It's probably maybe what was your school more like 10 to
it was
15%?
probably 10 to
Yeah.
15%. Yeah.
So you didn't feel outnumbered, but you didn't feel like you were the only one.
No, and it was interesting. because I think there were enough to feel like you were not the only,
Mhm.
um, but it also wasn't so much that you felt like you weren't a minority,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, um, it's not as if I didn't we opened by talking about my name.
Yeah.
I was made fun of
Mhm.
perpetually,
Mhm.
all the time, because no one could pronounce my name, or it was a strange Asian name. Maybe it was a strange Asian name. So that was around, but it was probably not as prevalent as if you were growing up in a neighborhood where you didn't have anybody that
Mhm.
you could relate to.
Yeah. And, did that make you feel like you wanted to assimilate more and not be as Asian in school, or you didn't? Because some people, to blend in, they try to assimilate and do all, not be as Asian as, and try to avoid attention. Did you feel like you did that, or were you more like, no, I had mostly Asian friends and I was fine?
I think I felt the pressure to assimilate.
Hmm.
I recognize that my parents didn't speak English that well, right?
Hmm.
And that was something that would come up if you were in a parent-teacher conference, right? So those types of things were actually there. And even though, a lot of my friends, I think, were first generation in the sense that their parents had immigrated, so they were the first generation born and raised in the U.S. And so whether that was Korean, Thai, Vietnamese, right? And so we were
Hmm.
all going through a similar dynamic of
Hmm.
adapting to what it meant to be Asian American, whereas our parents were not,
Hmm.
right? And what does that mean in how you relate to each other, and how do you interact and engage with other people?
Yeah.
Um, but I certainly felt pressure to, you know, just fit in,
Hmm.
right? Just to fit in, whether that was running for school office, or trying to make it onto a particular team,
Hmm.
but knowing that you weren't exactly the same as everybody else.
Right. And when you were applying to college, was it your goal to leave the West Coast because you're
It
like you wanted to go?
was.
Yeah. So we both went to Penn. I
We
was
did.
only an hour away, but you were much further away from home.
Yeah.
But what was it about the East Coast that made you want to leave? And like, how long did you have that dream of leaving the West Coast?
Yeah, I think this is where, in retrospect, you realize, when you're young, you really don't appreciate what you have.
Hmm.
I traveled a lot when I was young. I think I am thankful for that now in retrospect. I think at the time I didn't love it as much, but because my parents, were from these different areas, we would go to Singapore, we would visit family in
Hmm.
Singapore, we'd visit family in Taiwan, we'd visit family in Jakarta. And so that notion of the world was much larger than what my suburb
Hmm.
was very present.
Hmm.
And so the idea of going to college and having a choice of where to go, it just felt like, why would I limit myself to my backyard?
Hmm.
Let's try something bigger, bolder. Um, and so I have only applied to colleges outside of Los Angeles, and I went to visit New York City, and I was so overwhelmed. I was coming from a suburb, right,
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
LA,
Yeah.
and going there, it did feel overwhelming. And I popped around to different schools, and there's so many great institutions out there. But for me, Penn was this really interesting intersection between a city, with Philadelphia, but not this massive,
Hmm.
urban location.
Yeah.
At the same time, it had that old feeling that you
Yep.
don't have in LA, right? You
No.
don't have it's
No.
sunshine every day. There's no
Yeah.
like mood of
Yeah.
LA.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you still got that. Obviously, Penn is an incredibly good school, and so having the opportunity to have that education was great. And so I went.
And did you go in? You did an dual degree, in English and I'm guessing finance because you went to investment banking.
I did. So I went and started at Wharton
Uh-huh.
undergrad. But I think within the first year of school, I realized I needed to take more classes in the College of Arts and Sciences, which is the humanities school,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And for me, it was amazing to have the rigor of an undergraduate business program, but a lot of it is pretty formulaic, or it's about inferences that are really strong, if you understand what I'm
Yeah.
saying. Like
Yeah.
finance and economics and statistics, like there are really strong
Specific.
framework,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
In those fields. And you learn if something moves this way, this other
Yeah.
variable is going to move this other
Yeah.
way. And then you apply that to businesses,
Yeah.
government, international trade. For me, though, what was really missing was, well, what about when things are really ambiguous?
Yep. Yep.
What about like creativity, um, where there's not a defined framework,
Yep.
and you have to look at text, and you
Mhm.
have to look at artifacts, and you
Mhm.
have to learn from history, and you bring
Mhm.
all of that together and come up with a point of view. So I ended up pursuing a second major in English literature. And I'm just thankful I had the ability to work in some ways those two sides of my brain
Yeah. Yeah.
at Penn. And I think it gave me skills to look at
100%.
problems much more holistically. And I look at, I know we're in a moment in time as well where everyone is questioning, what does education look like
Mhm.
in the years to come, and what should people be studying, and all the things. And my hope is that, these areas that push people to think broadly, to learn how to synthesize, um, come up with, perspectives, versus just the answer,
Yep. Yep.
is where a lot of education will go. Hopefully, we'll see.
I mean, that this is awesome because I've thought about this too. Like, I regret going to Penn. I mean, I don't say it, I never say it, but because I chose to go to Wharton, I studied finance, and did a dual concentration, like strategic management and finance. I felt like I missed out on learning all the things I should have learned in college. So you did, I know, I think you did what I would have wanted to do, in that you get to have a major if I think you have 8 credits, I want to say, or eight something in another major you could do at another school. So I did 4 in psych, and I minored in psych, and I did
Okay.
poli sci too. But I cherished those courses outside
Yeah.
Wharton because I felt like, I'm like, oh man, this stuff is there's no room for creativity. Maybe marketing class did, but otherwise I'm learning accounting, finance, like open, whatever these things that stats.
Yeah.
I mean, they call it stats, but I mean, it was not. I felt like it was so constricting for me, and I didn't want that. And I felt like, had I done it all over again, I mean, I didn't even study abroad because I thought, oh, I might miss out on stuff. And so I don't. Did you study abroad?
I did. I studied
Oh,
abroad in London,
see,
and
you didn't.
I
You lived
all
my
I did
dream.
was,
Ah,
I like read books and went to plays.
that is what I want. I would. Now you lived the dream. I would. Did you go to LSE? Because there was that the
No,
one
I went to
where?
King's College. I
Oh,
went to
King.
King's
See,
College.
this is how I would have done it if I did it all over again, the way you did, because I feel like, I tell people now that I regret not doing something more in the humanities or arts, and that's the most non-Asian thing you can say. But
Yeah.
my parents were not going to pay for anything if I majored in English. They were like, no way. And so you got the degree that they wanted while you were doing. Hey, like, if I get my degree in Wharton, I get a finance degree, and I do well in school, you
Yeah.
can't be mad at me if I also get an extra degree in English or study something
True.
else.
And I think there was a part of me too where, school was so expensive. And this is probably the Asian side where it's like, school is
Get the
so
most
expensive.
value.
How do I get the most value out
Yeah,
of
yeah,
this time and the
100%.
debt that I'm going to incur?
Yeah, yeah.
And to your point, right, is okay, how do I put myself in situations where, just felt like this is what college was about.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
I think you're raising something that's really important, which I don't, certainly for me, I don't think risk taking was really encouraged when I was growing up. So I think my parents had come here, and they worked really hard to just create an environment to say, do well in school, right? Don't rock the boat, and you will have opportunities. But at the same time, they never said to me, "You can do anything you want to do,"
Yeah.
right? They never said, "You can be anything,"
Yeah.
which I have friends that whose parents told them,
Yeah.
"You can do anything."
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
And so I do think that that leads many of us, me, myself included,
Yeah.
into areas that feel safer,
Yeah.
that feel like that path is determined, or at least you can see it, right?
Yeah.
And then um, the volatility of outcome is much more narrow,
Mhm.
and for a lot of folks, like that's a positive, right? Like
Yeah.
you want certainty.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, I think what you're raising is that certainty, success outcomes can be defined in a lot of different ways.
Right. And I mean, I get it. I
Yeah.
think for our parents, they a lot of them weren't strong English speakers, so they were like, okay, well, what jobs can I get that I don't need to speak a lot of? If I'm a
Yes.
CPA or if I'm scientist or an engineer, like I don't have to be strong in English, but I can make a good living, secure, find a job. Those are the things they prioritize. It's funny that you brought what you just brought about other parents saying that you can be anything you want. There's a comedian I saw on Instagram, this Malaysian comedian, like he's a doctor, Dr. Jason Leong. He was joking about how, you know, he's like, oh, white American men have like feel like they can do anything because their parents tell them you can literally do anything and be anything you want to be. The Asian parents say you can be these three things, and they like, and he jokes was like their parents may give you this dream was like, oh, the white American male's parents says, you came from storks that flew in from the heavens and brought you to us, and Asian parents like, oh, we found you in the garbage can. I'm like, oh my god, my dad literally told me that once. He's like, we found you in the trash, and
Oh
it's
my
like you're told these things like, okay, so you these are the things you can be, and it's like very limited. And then he joked about, he's like, you know, and then they talk about your ROI. This is what your return on my investment. Basically, I'm putting money into you, so you will return it back to me, and that's what your whole life is supposed to be about. And so, I go in, and my parents told me like they're not paying for if I go to school and I don't study something that I can get a job, engineering or finance or whatever, they're not paying for it. So I said, okay, I guess I'll have to go to a business program or something else because I didn't want to do engineering and I didn't want to do pre med. Um, so I didn't really have a choice. But then once I was there, after graduating and going to consulting, I was like, man, all these other kids, they're catching up to me pretty quickly. Like when you're an investment banking analyst, all the kids from Brown who are poli-sci majors, they learn Excel eventually too, and they caught up after 6 months or 2 months, whatever. So I was like, why did I spend all my time doing all this? And half the stuff I didn't end up using. It seemed like I regretted like wasting all that time focusing on that when I could have learned art history, English, political science, things that would make me philosophy, things that make me a better storyteller. Like this is why I think being an English lit major, I mean that is a gift and a superpower that so many Asians don't have because we focus on STEM things or very practical, logical things that again can get you a job. Now the AI can replace whatever, but the storytelling part is something we're so bad at, and that's I think for sales, fundraising, um, you know, getting on boards, like interviewing, whatever it might be. If you're a bad storyteller, you can't you can't do these things very well. And so, I don't want to wade into the topic about affirmative action, but I do talk about it, with friends. And I think, would I want to be in a class of all Asians who were just good at math and science? No. Like that would be sheer boredom for me because then it would not be interesting. I want people who actually are good storytellers, who care about other things, who are very diverse in their thought, because that's how I learn. Like if I'm with a bunch of other finance majors, that's why I didn't move to New York after to go banking because I was like, I do not, I
Oh,
know all these other Wharton grads. I'm like, I do not want to be around more people like this, so I'm going to go to California right away. But
you
that's
went
why
the other way.
I
I
went the
went
other
one
way.
way and you went the
Yeah,
other way.
exactly. I'm like,
Yeah.
get me out of here. But yeah, I mean, I think it's amazing that you had the foresight. I don't know if you knew you had the foresight, but it's game
I
changing that you
don't,
did that.
I don't think I had the foresight, and you raised something really interesting as well. When I was growing up, I wanted to be Connie Chung. I mean, that was the person, when you asked me, what do you want to do? I would say, I want to be a broadcast journalist. And why would I say that? It was the only Asian
Yeah,
female
they saw.
on television, right? And she was beautiful. She spoke perfect English. She was sitting and talking to and debating with heads of states, incredible
Uh-huh.
people. And the furthest I ever got with that was I was editor of my student paper. But the reason why I think I never really pursued it was the the feeling of being uncomfortable with speaking in public.
Mm,
As a high schooler, right? At,
mm.
at that age, it's like that skill hadn't
You
really
haven't.
been
Yeah.
developed, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that, a 17-year-old should like know exactly what to do when they get on stage. But again, it goes back to a little bit of that risk taking.
Hmm.
There was less of that risk taking kind of embedded in me, and more of the fear of failure, and I know it means, right,
Yeah.
like what are you going to look
Losing
like,
face.
right,
Yeah.
if you don't do well at
Yeah.
it. um and so that never happened, but I do think that now when I think about my kids, the ability to allow them to explore, to take risks, smart risk, right? To take
Yeah.
risk, um, to find what it is that they want to do is going to be really important. And to see more people that look like them who
Hmm.
are doing those things too. And those things span art, it spans comedy, it should span entertainment, it should span
Hmm.
law, it should span business. All of those things
Yeah.
hopefully are now in play.
Yeah. And I mean, also the opportunity or ability to fail, like give them the chance to fail at things, because I don't feel like that's something I ever sought out. Like it wasn't like I went to go see if I could fail. I'm like, but I would just not try, because it was like, well, if I'm not gonna be good at it, I'm not even gonna bother. But I don't want my kids to think that. I'm like, hey, you might not, never know. You might actually be good at something, and you have to give it a shot. So, um, but yeah, it's interesting how we're gonna raise our kids going into college versus if there is college when my kids are old enough. But
Exactly.
it's like, but it's very different. So you went the after you did not go into journalism. You were not a
No,
news
I went
anchor.
down the traditional,
You went to
investment
banking.
banking
Yeah,
route out of school.
yeah. And I think most people don't realize this, but when you go to Wharton, you're set up freshman year, sophomore year. There's like a career center. You are doing interview prep from the day you walk through school, and it's the weirdest place
It
compared to
is.
other
It
colleges.
is.
I mean, no one
I've heard it's
understands.
gotten worse since we've been
How
there,
can
by
that
the
be?
way.
How can
So
that be?
I've heard that you line up your junior internship in sophomore year. So you do it a year and a half in
I mean,
advance.
to be fair, we were trying to do that already by trying to get the freshman year internship for the sophomore year internship to get the junior.
Oh my gosh.
But like, oh man. So, but I feel like that sucked the life out of college for me. Like, it's
Yeah.
just like, you're pursuing something right away. Like, you don't know most kids don't know what they want to be, and they're getting to explore while they're in college. We're
Yeah.
freshman year. We're like, okay, I'm going to do case studies and then practice doing Excel spreadsheets. I'm like, ah. Anyway, for all you Penn folks out there listening, you understand. but, um, but you went into banking in New York at Merrill. Is that right?
I did. So I went to banking in New York, at Merrill, and I focused in the media space. And I actually really loved my time in investment banking. And I chose media because, if I even think back to what we just talked about, I wanted to be a broadcast
Yeah.
journalist because
Yeah.
it was what I saw on TV,
Yeah.
right? And I I guess at that point, I could really relate to how customers and consumers looked at content because I was one of those
Hmm.
people. Um, and I wanted to spend my time working in an area that I could relate to versus, when you go into investment banking, there's some people work on industrials,
Hmm.
right? Some people work on like telecom, right? There are all these industries. And for me, something that was very consumer centric, was what was appealing. So I did that, and it was great. Like learning the business and the landscape around something that was very personally interesting to me. It's a great way to do that. But I also witnessed and I was in the middle of the internet bubble,
Yeah.
right? Um, and what was really interesting about that period was there was a lot of companies that were overvalued. They didn't have sustainable business models, and then they disappeared.
Hmm.
Um, and then the ones that were left were the ones that were actually going to shape what consumer look like,
Hmm.
and that was really fascinating to me.
Yeah.
How was the internet, which was still being widely adopted, going to change the way we engaged with content with each other. How was that going to look in the media space? So I spent a few years there. And then I wanted to work at those companies.
Mm-hmm.
I think you've been in consulting, so you know what it's like
Yeah.
on the professional services side. But I've been on on the company side now. Once I went over, I realized, oftentimes the investment bankers, they leave the room, and the team looks at each other and they either say, "Wow, that was a waste of time," right? I'm going to throw this pitch deck that
Yeah.
an investment analyst was at night at 2 a.m. flipping.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or they say, wow, there's some really interesting stuff here. They really know what they're talking about. We need to like spend more time with them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I loved being on that corporate side, and the types of things that I got to work on were things that again related to consumer. What do games look like if people play less on console and
Mm-hmm.
go to mobile, right? How
Mm-hmm.
do you build games in that space?
Mm-hmm.
Um, what was content going to look like on social platforms?
Yeah.
And I mean, I distinctly remember I was working for Viacom at the time, and I was negotiating a deal for bringing MTV content, Comedy Central content, Nickelodeon content to Snapchat,
Mm.
and it was their Discover product. And those were all that's where the kids were, right?
Yeah.
The generation, the people who were going to watch MTV weren't watching it
On
on
TV. Yeah.
cable anymore. They were watching it on these platforms. And I remember Snap told us, okay, well, we need you to give us 6 pieces of content every single day, vertical format. And at the time, people who were working making the content was like, this is insane. We can't like cut content vertically. We
Yeah.
don't do that.
Yeah.
And being able to say, no, well, we got to do it. Like this, we got to follow our consumers, and we got
Yeah.
to like meet them where they are. And now, right, open Instagram, open
It's all of it.
TikTok.
Yeah.
You wouldn't even question the need for content that's vertical.
Yeah.
And so things like that, has been just great to be at the forefront
Yeah.
of influencing and helping shape.
What's that like when you are kind of you understand all these trends, but then you're working a lot with a lot of old guys who don't understand that and are just resistant to it? I mean, as a young Asian woman trying to convince them, I mean, these are dinosaurs and they're, not budging. Like, how do you I mean, I'd imagine I'd be pulling my hair out because, like, I felt like that sometimes at
Yeah,
eBay and other places. But,
yeah.
yeah, what was it like?
I mean, it certainly takes patience, and it's you're educating, right? And
Yeah,
you probably experienced that where
yeah,
I've literally sat with executives before in a meeting, and my job was to show them how Snapchat works,
yeah.
right? Or to
Your tech
show them,
support, basically, like your parents. Like,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And you're like, wait, I went to the University of
yeah,
Pennsylvania, like, and I am like doing tech support,
yeah,
you know? Um, but at the same time, if you think about it and you say, wow, these people are in positions of power,
yeah.
right? And they are diverting millions of dollars of resources. And here's this gap that they
Hmm.
have. They actually don't know. And they're not going to go and download it and create an account and like do the thing or spend the time. Maybe they'll understand it if their kids are telling them about it.
Yeah,
But here's this gap.
yeah,
And either somebody else is going to teach them, right? And
yeah,
like get credit for
yeah,
thinking about this and
yeah.
being future forward, or you're going to spend the time and fill that gap and become the expert, right? Become the
Hmm.
person who knows what's happening and what's going on. And that's the person to turn to, right? As things are developing and when they're developing so quickly. So it takes a lot of patience,
Yeah,
absolutely. Um, and it takes a lot of, I would say, you know, just that personal the influence. How do
yep,
you influence somebody and not just show them how it works, but like what does it mean, right?
yeah.
Like if you believe this is going to happen or people are moving into this
Like,
direction,
why
like
should I care?
that's why should I
Yeah,
care?
yeah,
Why should I care?
yeah,
And sometimes, I am the only woman in the room,
yeah.
or the only Asian in the room.
Hmm.
Um, and I have found that there are some rooms where you find your allies, like whether it's an Asian man, right, where they are more senior, they have more power. um are they welcoming more of those perspectives? If
Mhm.
great, take advantage of that moment. Um, or, yeah, you're different, but you're also not them. Therefore, they can't understand what it's like to be
Yeah.
a younger person,
Yeah.
digitally savvy, right? All
Yeah.
those things. And how do you bring that to the forefront?
Yeah. Use it as your asset because I think a lot of people think if I'm different, everyone thinks of me as like it's a weakness or it's a bad. But it's like, well, you could lean into it and you're like, I'm the only one in this room who actually understands this, so you should listen to me because I'm the expert.
Exactly. And I think that is so important. And I have realized over time in my different, roles that it's not just I'm different and I'm the expert, but I represent a huge business
Yeah.
opportunity, right?
Yeah.
I
You're the
rep
consumer that they're trying to. Yeah.
I'm the consumer. I'm a huge chunk, right,
Yeah.
of the consumer audience that we as a business want to
Yeah.
access.
Yeah.
And so being really close to that is a huge advantage, and
Hmm.
being able to express that, I think, is incredibly important.
It's an interesting point that I don't think I've ever touched on before, but when you bring up like when you're in a room, literally in a room, and you scan around the room for allies, like you have to be strategic about who you see in that room also on, and you might be wrong. I mean, you have to make a lot of assumptions when you go in that room, but I don't know that people are as strategic as they should be when they go into a boardroom or a meeting like somewhere that they have to present or they're trying to win over opinions and, you know, change people's minds. Cause I do feel like, and that's where the storytelling comes in place, but it's huge to actually scan the room for potential allies and
It's huge, and I think you're spot on about storytelling. One is understanding who's in the room and building those relationships even before you get
beforehand.
into the room. I'm a natural, I skew introvert.
Mm,
So, being in those big rooms and kind of being ad hoc and whatnot is like not where I naturally get energy from. Um, but I like having those one-on-one conversations, right? And then what it means is that once you're in the room, you have a much better sense of your allies and
mhm,
what their perspectives are. And sometimes it's even as easy if I'm demonstrating something, I'm talking about a product experience, right? I can actually say, "Hey, Dave, imagine you are X, Y, and Z," right? And the story I'm telling about you, Dave, is actually incredibly relevant because I've already gotten to know you. So I'm
mhm,
going to tell you the story
mhm.
that connects to what I'm about to demonstrate
Yeah.
in a way that you're going to understand
Yep.
like right away,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And that's part of the storytelling, I
Yeah.
think, where you got to know your audience,
Yep.
and then you take those moments to leverage that knowledge to be able to get the influence across.
Yeah, I mean, it very much is chess. You're just thinking like, what are two steps ahead? Like, I already know who's going to be in that room. I've already talked to them before. I grabbed coffee with them before. Like, I know where they stand. So you kind of do the work before going in. You go in cold. I don't know that. When I was younger, I don't know that I thought through any of that stuff. It's just like, oh, I prepared. I did my homework, and I go in, and I can answer any questions or whatever. But it was almost like that. That isn't how you lead. That's kind of how you follow, like, because I was told to, this is my assignment and I know what I'm supposed to do, and I'm a good obedience like soldier. um but no one's being impressed by that because it's basically meeting the minimum, and you're not going to contribute any like big ideas that way. But um I did you feel do you feel like the English lit major, like when did that, how does that come in to play? I mean, obviously you're not reading Shakespeare to the class or to meetings, but how do you feel like that's helped in those rooms?
I think there's an appreciation for the storytelling, but also for the power of words,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which words do you use and what are you using them for, whether that is in writing or in speech?
Mm-hmm.
And recognizing that those types of choices can really make a difference.
100%.
Um, I'm not sure what that's going to look like, in a world where
Yeah.
everybody just uses AI
ChatGPT,
to,
yeah.
to write. Um, but I think certainly there is some level of value when you realize, wow, I'm making an argument, I'm putting something forward, the way I tell the story, the words I use to tell the
Mhm,
story, the length of my story,
mhm.
all of these
Matter.
things matter, right?
Mhm,
do I want to start with the punchline and then, build
Yep.
up, right? And or do I tell the story one way and then
Mm-hmm.
like build to the climax? Like
Yeah.
as silly as that sounds, I mean, these are real ways to make arguments and put forth business cases.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't think I really, I was very similar to you, Dave. I think early in our career, we're just trying to learn,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're like absorbing, who's going to teach me? How can I be the sponge and just, I'm going to do whatever you want me to do. And then at some point, I think, you realize, well, I know a lot. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know everything, but I know a decent amount. And
Yeah.
then now, how do I apply that learning
Yeah.
to whatever the problem is? And do I have the um, initiative to be able to offer up my perspective, right?
Yeah.
And to have it stand. Is it credible?
Yeah.
Anybody can offer up a perspective,
Yeah.
but if you don't have some backing of expertise or hard work or delivery,
Yeah.
no one's going to listen, right? And
Exactly.
so you earn that credibility to be able to talk. Yeah.
I mean, I think the writing and the I guess even how you arrange the story and tell the story, all those things people don't realize matter because that's how you have to understand how people are going to feel when they hear it or when they read it or when they listen. And people nowadays, I mean, and maybe it's always been like this, but people nowadays more than ever, they don't care about facts, they care about feelings. And so if you are, and I'm not saying you try to manipulate their feelings, but you do want to take them on a journey so that they can get to the point that you're trying to make to them. And that is very much how you craft that email or how you talk about it in a presentation and bring them along. And I think, that's not something, unless you majored in English, that you break down and like that you really understand. I mean, it's funny. My son's in fourth grade, and he's trying to write a story, and I got feedback from a teacher's like, "Hey, can you encourage Dash that he has to learn that there has to be a problem in every story because he's writing the story around all these characters and stuff, but there's no problem." And I'm like, that's something a lot of people in pitches don't do right either. And when you're presenting, you don't do right. So there's a natural progression,
Yeah.
like in every movie and everything, there is a
Yeah.
big problem, and then they have to figure it out and solve it. But even the basic, like building blocks of storytelling, it's not something I necessarily studied ever or understood until I started writing more. But again, it's that those things are so important, but we never talk about. And I think going to Stanford, I thought GSB would. I should have. The one thing I was wondering is like, why don't we have a sales class? Like that's probably the most important thing I could learn from this whole MBA experience. But I didn't have a sales class; I
Yeah.
had other classes. So I think the storytelling aspect is really important.
Yeah. I remember, I went to Harvard Business School, and I remember my first year there was a guy in my section who had been in sales, and there was some kind of case, in the sales space, and the professor said, "All right, I want somebody to come up here and you have to pitch this product to the team, like to the class, and you have like 3 minutes to do it." And I remember this classmate of mine goes up and he pitched this thing so well, right? Like I knew when I saw it, I was like, I could never do that today.
Hmm.
Like I was never like, this is a skill, right? But maybe some people it comes completely naturally, I think, or maybe the basics are there. But like he had honed his skill, right,
Hmm.
over time.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. It's very interesting that there are these skills, like really, most anything is a skill, right?
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you think about it, whether it's
Yeah.
public speaking, storytelling, how do you approach fundraising,
Yeah.
different aspects of leadership. Um, all of these are skills that, if you say, I'm going to start working on it, and I'm going to practice, and I'm going to put myself out there, I'm going to do it
Yeah.
over time, just like,
Yeah.
you decide you want to learn to play tennis,
Yeah.
right? At some point, you will become a better tennis player.
Yeah.
And at some point, you will become a better salesperson. But you have to view it as something that is worth learning and that you're going to actually do it.
And I mean, I think your response or reaction to that is a clear sign that that is a very real superpower. Like that, when he presented that, and you're like, "Oh yeah, I'll buy it." Whatever you just said, I'll buy it. But think about that in just daily life and why those folks will achieve more or be promoted more because they've won the trust and like of the superior, their superior or the person who's going to promote them. The partners are going to like think, "Oh, this person would be great at selling more business for me." Investor would say, "Oh, this person can fundraise from anything." Like when you meet someone who's really good at storytelling, that person can go really far just because they have the ability to win people over. And that's probably the most important, I feel like, skill that you can have. I mean, you can be great at the Excels and the modeling and this and that, but so can a lot of people, and so can AI eventually, right? It's like those things can be replaceable. But I mean, you can argue that storytelling will be replaceable at some point too. But I feel like in person, that still matters. That kind of, as the kids call it, that charisma is that charisma is not something that you can just, manufacture.
I think that charisma and storytelling paired with substance, right? Like
Yeah.
it will, because you can't, and I've managed a lot of folks too that, have a lot of charisma, but then when you get down to, okay, can you
Yeah.
deliver the thing you just sold me,
Yeah.
right? Can you do the thing? Amazing. Like I'm
Yeah.
going to give you the responsibility to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Can you do it? If you can also do it, I mean, together, that is,
Huge combination. Yeah.
it's huge. It's
Yeah.
huge, right?
Powerful. Yeah.
It's so powerful. And,
Yeah.
each of these things can be worked on, right? So your point around building a model and saying, "Oh, you told me to do X, so I delivered X."
Hmm.
That's a skill too, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who
Totally.
don't even have the discipline to be
Yeah.
able to do that.
Yeah.
This other part to say, "Okay, but I am also more than just that. I
Yeah.
can also piece together the story and sell
Yeah.
you on this." I mean,
Yeah.
together that is incredible.
I mean, I think that's why I feel like it's much easier to learn. I didn't mean, it's bold to say it. It's much easier to learn the charisma and practice your storytelling than it is to actually learn how to have substance and have the skill and intelligence to do that work. I feel like so many Asians are really good at doing the work. They just need to learn the other skill, the other superpower of selling and storytelling. But if, more people work at it, I think that they could have the world. I mean, this is literally,
Yeah.
that's how you get, to where you want to be. And I feel like that's why I'm trying to teach everyone. It's like, hey, this is so, so important. I know you don't think it is, but it really is.
It's really important, and I also think that, many of our backgrounds probably work against it, right?
Yeah.
Going back to what we were talking about, risk taking and putting yourself out there, and 你的面子.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that what's really helped me, well, I guess a few things. One is, I went to Harvard Business School where literally you're graded on whether you speak up and how coherent
Your
the
arguments are.
messages
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
say. Which is very uncomfortable, right? Where if you come from a place where you were encouraged to not rock the boat, to not put out, incredibly risky ideas and whatnot, you don't naturally walk into those rooms and suddenly become the first person holding up your hand.
Yeah.
And so that actually took me a while to get used to
Hmm.
and even like tolerate, I would say. Like
Yeah.
when you walk in, you're like, I can't believe this is like what they do here. And
Yeah.
then you realize, okay, maybe this is like somewhat helpful. And
Yeah.
then you also see, wow, my peer is actually so good at this. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Like how do I become more like that
Like that.
person?
Yeah.
Yes. And so I think that's one part of it. And then I think the other part is putting yourself out there and not thinking too much about the downside, because usually the
Yeah.
downside of speaking up is usually not as
Not
big
as
as
bad as you
anyone
think. Yeah.
imagines,
Yeah.
right? And so whether it's asking for what you want or putting it out there
Yeah.
that, this is your ambition, or
Yeah.
hey, this is a new idea that I'm bouncing around,
Yeah.
oftentimes we almost like self-censor
Oh, totally.
because of that downside risk, when that downside risk is actually very, very
Not that bad.
low.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so getting into that mindset is definitely a shift. But
Yeah.
once you start to have more of that mindset, I think it gives you more permission in some
Hmm.
ways to start experimenting and to start trying to do more there.
And I mean, I always encourage, when I give talks to different companies, I tell them, like, you don't transform into Barack Obama overnight. Like, you have to start speaking up a little bit, and you try here and there, and then you get better and better. But you have to start somewhere. And I think that means, or being afraid of like failing or embarrassing yourself. I mean, that's what I feel like my parents, at least, or many parents, drilled into us. So we don't want to be, look like a failure, or we don't want to sound stupid or be like, judged, because we were constantly judged. And so I think when we get over it and realize, lot people don't, like you said, the consequences aren't nearly as bad as you think they're going to be. And also people don't think about you as much as you think they do, but we're in
Yeah.
our minds, we've been trained to think everything I do is under the like observation and
Yeah.
the judgment or critique of the eye of the parents or whoever it's going
Yeah.
to be. Right.
I think that's a huge learning. And when people ask me, what's like a takeaway you would give somebody, I always say that is like we tend to overestimate how much people care or think about us.
Yes. 100%.
Right? Is
100%.
that you think people are fixated on your missteps or
Yeah.
what you said in that meeting, when in fact it's so much less than you
Yeah.
imagine in
They're
your
worried about their
mind.
own stuff.
They're everyone's the center of their own
Yeah.
story,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And so if you think that, then why not say the thing, right?
Yeah.
Why not put that you
Nothing
take
to
a risk?
lose.
Why not? I mean,
Yeah.
you really have very little to lose. And
Exactly.
my assumption is that you're not an asshole, right? But
Yeah.
you do it in a way that it puts you into the conversation,
Right.
right? It makes you a part of what is going on.
Right.
Um, and that starts to open up doors. It starts to create
100%.
paths, more learning, right? More
Yeah.
responsibility.
Yeah.
Then a lot more opportunity comes.
I mean, and I always think people always complain about not getting promoted or this or that. I'm like, well, if you don't speak up and they don't know your opinion, then why would they even consider you for promotion? Like if you never share those things and you're never the one who's putting it out there, taking the risks, they're not even going to notice you because they don't know who you are. Like they don't know what you stand for or
Yeah.
what you bring to the table because you've never actually boldly said what you have to add.
Yeah. I mean, and I remember a conversation I had with one of my bosses, managers, and I did say at one point it was nerve-wracking for me to say it. I said, if the situation doesn't work out, I would like to throw my hat in the ring to be CEO, right? And that situation never panned out. It,
Hmm.
it, it didn't, unfortunately. But what I learned from that was it's exactly what you said. It was suddenly the idea that, oh, she's interested in
Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
right? Or now I have the opportunity to say, okay, that didn't work out. Like, tell me why,
Yeah.
right? And what do I
It's
need to
out
work on?
there. Yeah. It's out
Like,
there.
what do I need to work out on? What are the things that you'd like to see me have under my belt?
Yep. Yep.
So that when the next thing comes around, I have a serious,
Yeah.
you'll seriously consider me.
Yeah.
Um, but I remember it was hard to actually say that
Hmm.
because it's not a natural thing for a lot of us.
Hmm.
I think there are people out there, maybe those folks that, were told that they could do
They do
anything that they
anything.
wanted,
Yeah.
right? Like super easy for them,
Yeah.
not that easy for me. But once I said it, it felt uh, incredible because it
Yeah.
was out there. It was out. What was in my mind was suddenly now out in the world,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And now we could work towards that in a much more meaningful way
Yep.
than just in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've heard this. I don't know if it's Jenny Ming that said this or other people, but if you don't, and this is not just to be a CEO, but this is like your next promotion. If you
Yeah.
put it out there and there are hurdles to cross, then at least your manager is stated and knows what your intentions are and then said, okay, well, these are the things you have to do. You can hold them accountable to those. I did the 3 things you told me to get this promotion,
Yes.
and now I want my job. Like I want the promotion because I did
Yes.
exactly what you said. Then they're basically beholden to what they put on,
Yes.
not put on
And if they
paper, but
don't do it, then that gives you more information that maybe
yes,
it's not the right
not the right
place,
place for
right?
you.
So
Exactly,
yeah,
exactly.
exactly. Exactly.
So it's always better to put out there than assume, like oh, they're just going to give it to me. Because I think the assumption for a lot of Asians is I'm going to work so hard that they're going to see
Yeah.
me and I will get recognized and I'll get promoted just from the quality of my work. I'm like, well, there's a lot of other stuff that happens behind the scenes. That person who goes to hang out with them for lunch or goes golfing with that manager, they're probably more likely to get on that board or be promoted than you are. So, until you explicitly state your intentions, it's basically you're friend zoned until you actually say something, right? So,
Yeah.
like, but
Yeah.
but yeah, so okay, let's go back to the career. Like we've talked all you went to, so you were a VP at wait, this is when you were at Viacom, was it Warner Bros. Or Viacom before you moved over to SoundCloud? It
Yeah.
was Warner
I
Bros.
was
You
at
were
Viacom
Warner's.
before I moved over to SoundCloud.
Okay, so you were at a big company,
Yeah.
like big media company, you had everything you wanted. Like you're doing media, doing really cool, and then you're not into music, I think, and you went to some startup, a German startup. What happened? What were you
I
going through?
know. I
What were you
know.
thinking?
I know. I mean, what's interesting is when people ask me about my career, they're like, "Oh, did you, get on this path?" And I said, "No, it's like most, and I'm guessing most people tell you these paths are not linear, right? It's
Yeah,
not like you can map it out as cleanly and then just get on and then
sure.
start
A lot
moving.
of things have to happen. Yeah.
A lot of things have to happen, and what's your mindset around it? And my mindset has always been about learning.
Hmm.
I think I'm just a very deeply curious person, and I really like to solve hard problems. And so when the opportunity to join SoundCloud, which is a music streaming platform, so imagine the YouTube for
Hmm.
audio, um, when it came to me, I took a moment and I thought about it and I said, wow, what an incredible opportunity for me to learn across a number of dimensions. It was a new industry, music, interested in it, but also, really like not so close to it, but so fascinating in terms of business model. The both the huge people as well as like the long tail, all of these things. Spotify at the time wasn't public yet,
Mm.
so there's lots happening in the industry. It's a new industry, new stage. This was much earlier stage than these large media
Hmm.
companies that I had been at, and a new organization in the sense that I joined probably when there were 200, 220 people.
Oh wow,
And, these organizations for media are,
huge.
10,000
Yeah,
plus, they're all over the world.
yeah.
And so I really felt like this is a great opportunity to take what I knew and now apply it into a new environment, but also now would I like earlier stage? Would I like a
Hmm.
smaller organization? I didn't know.
Hmm.
Um, so I took the leap, and assumed I would figure it all out. And I think that's another thing that, we tend to not, get comfortable with, right? Is like taking the leap and
Yeah,
actually pushing ourselves to get uncomfortable.
yeah.
But I loved working on a digital first product. All these other companies I had been at before were, either they were
Media. Yeah.
putting their media, right? You go to a
Content.
movie
Yeah,
theater to watch
yeah.
content, or you are, looking at cable and you're
Yeah.
watching your TV shows.
Hmm.
And suddenly this was a, hey, every day you wake up, you're working on an app. And you're working on a brand that's digital native, right?
Hmm.
Um, and it's incredibly global suddenly, right? Now somebody, making music in Thailand can actually get that music to somebody in West Covina,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Um, and all of that to me was such a great experience. But you're right, it was based in Germany. And so, having these multiple headquarters was really challenging.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the mission around democratizing music was so strong. And even just seeing content come out of, Asia
Uh-huh.
that gets picked up in Canada,
Uh-huh.
right? Or, oh my gosh, music from Spain actually travels to Mexico, right? It,
Yeah.
it, it was amazing.
Did you find that like German corporate culture was very different than the American companies were at?
I think they enjoy work-life balance more.
Europeans in general. Yeah. Yeah.
Europeans in general, they like their month of August off.
Even Germans. Oh wow.
Yes. Um, I do think there is a difference. The establishment of culture was really important, I think,
Hmm.
in the way that you work. Um, and I think that's grown in prominence for Western companies,
Hmm.
but I think it takes shape in a different
Different way.
way, right? Yeah, I think it really takes shape in a different way. But I loved the headquarters was in Berlin, so being there, where it's really a progressive city
Hmm.
in Europe, was terrific too, and working on something that was related to culture, music, being
Yeah.
so such a key part of that fabric.
So in tech, it's pretty male dominated, and I'm assuming like you once you move from the media companies to SoundCloud and then Tinder, I mean, assuming that the demographics were similar, it was more skewed more male than your that Viacom and Warner Brothers. Is that true, or they were all pretty male?
It is skewed more men, and with tech, right, you've got a lot of product and engineering roles that tend to the pipeline changes,
Mhm.
right? Just and it's something I'm also thinking a lot about because my daughters love math
Mhm.
and um junior high, early high school is when girls tend to opt
Opt
out
out.
of
Yeah.
that
STEM.
track,
Yeah.
right? Um and obviously when that happens, your pipeline, right, over time for talent also looks different and
Yeah.
changes.
Yeah.
Um, I think for me taking on bigger and bigger roles at Match Group and then ultimately becoming the CEO of Tinder, part of what was really important to me was bringing more women into the fold and having them have a voice at the table.
Mhm.
And not because that's like a generous thing to do. It was really because we have a product that is also meant to
Yeah.
serve women,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. hundred
We have
percent.
a product where if we don't appeal to women, it it won't work. Like
Yeah.
the ecosystem
Yeah.
of the platform
Yeah.
becomes imbalanced and
The
it
marketplace is
will
ruined. Yeah.
exactly, right? And so you need people talking about product features and design
Yeah.
with another sensibility in
Yep.
mind so that we have a holistic view of these
Yeah.
things. And that's something that is hard because then it goes back to I can sit there and wish that I had, a CTO who's female that's done X, Y, and Z, but actually finding that person can be really
Mhm.
challenging um, because of that
Pipeline.
pipeline.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And obviously everybody's experiences are different
Yeah.
and there are people who may not be a woman but they've worked on products right for women, right?
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
experience is really great to lean into too. We
Yeah.
also, at Tinder, we're global, right?
Yeah.
So not only are we the largest dating app in the US, but we were that in Thailand
Mhm.
and in Vietnam and
Mhm.
in all these countries where dating culture looks different
Different.
as well. And
Yeah.
so how do you make sure you're getting that point of view too?
Yeah.
So those were things that were really important. And I've really taken away as well as being core to building a team, and building a product that can reflect your customers.
And so, what would your advice be from all the people who are trying to navigate corporate, like company politics through your, through your career, given that, there aren't as many women, especially not as many Asian women moving up through the ranks. Like how did you navigate the politics, or like what would you say was your superpower that got you up the ladder? Because, everyone's wondering what the secret sauce is, and you clearly got to the top, with whatever you used. So, what is that secret sauce?
Yeah. I think it actually is very similar to what we've been talking about.
Hmm.
One is you got to do the work, right? You've
Hmm.
got to be
That's
actually
table
good
stakes.
at
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
doing the work.
yeah.
And whatever role you've been hired for, if you're a junior marketer, right, or a product designer, or a finance
Hmm.
person, you got to like deliver what you're meant to deliver.
Hmm.
I think then it's okay, now you gotta go beyond that, right? You've got to actually step up and volunteer for the things that show your scope and your impact can be broader than the lane that you're in.
Hmm.
Um, and you wanna genuinely want to do it, right?
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
I think people often see, "Oh, I'm just doing this for the promotion," or, "I'm just doing this, to get in with, like, the person."
Yeah.
But I think people who show up who are really curious and want to solve problems and they find problems that their bosses they didn't get time to get
Yeah.
to it, right?
Yeah.
Like it's on the list, right? But like wasn't time to like talk about it. But
Yeah.
but if you know what those are and you have the ability to help solve them,
Yeah.
like dive in and demonstrate that you're willing to do more, you're
Mhm.
capable of doing more, and you can trust me to do
Mhm.
more.
Mhm.
And I think that part is really important as well. And I don't think of it as politics so much as how do you build trusted relationships,
Mhm.
right? And trust is a hard thing to nail down because I believe it requires vulnerability. It
Mhm.
requires, the notion that I'm here to help you, you're here to help me, right?
Mhm.
And no judgment, right? And that's hard in a manager, direct report relationship.
Yeah.
But if there is trust built, it's much easier for that boss to think of you
Hmm.
when something does come down the pipeline
Yeah.
and they need to consider new people, right? Because they're
Yeah.
going to go to somebody they trust
Yeah.
first before they're like, "Oh, that one's like a wild card." Like
Yeah.
I don't that person, like I've heard certain things about
Right.
them. I'm not really
Right.
sure, right? But like, "Oh, Dave, I know and
Hmm.
I've seen him do great work and
Yeah.
I trust him to
Yeah.
be a good person that takes this job really seriously. Let's throw his hat in the ring." Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it goes when you were saying before is like you can't just do what you think is going to get you that next promotion, that little bullet point. Because I think for a lot of folks who, and I do think Asians tend to be more so transactional or transaction minded about like, because this is the same thing of, I feel like you if you treat someone to lunch, you keep tabs. It's like, oh, they're gonna pay you back. Or like my parents would always, I'm like, oh, okay, they got us this time. We have to get them next time. Remember that. But it's always like a tit for tat thing. And I've written about it. And it's like you can't build real deep relationships of trust when you're transactional. If they know that you're just only like doing something like, oh, they're just coming to me because they need something, like you'll never build trust that way. It has to be you weren't even thinking about it. Like you said, that there's something that they needed done. You in your mind, you projected that, you like thought forward and like, okay, I know that they need this, let me be proactive and get that done for them. Then they're like, oh wow, like you went out of their way and you actually did the extra, like went the extra mile to do something that I needed done but I couldn't get done. Those are the types of things that they remember. And at the end of the
Yeah.
day, you just want to be top of mind when that next
Yeah.
promotion comes up. And so you've planted that seed. You're like, hey, I've already proven I can do the work. Now you just, when that opportunity comes up, I want to be the first person you choose.
Yeah.
um
And all of that I think is the reputation you build,
Mhm.
right? And the reputation isn't just like it should be multifaceted
Mhm.
and and you don't want to be the person when my hypothetical that either is like I've never heard of that person, like
Mhm.
I don't know that person,
Yeah.
right? Or
Or you've heard bad
oh
things.
no, I've heard some bad
Yeah.
things, I don't know, right?
Yeah.
And that's where um there's a lot of agency here, right?
Yep.
And I think that's probably another takeaway for folks is
Yep.
that uh and I can even equate it to Tinder, right? Tinder didn't market for a really long time all the good things that it was doing. And
Mhm.
so what happened was its reputation got away
Yeah.
from it, right?
Yeah.
And we let everybody else
Yeah, they
define
tell
what
the
the
story about
reputation.
you. Yeah, you're like, "Oh, it's a hookup."
Yeah,
So it's
they
just like if
told
you just wanna hook
our
up.
competitors told the
Yeah.
story
Yeah.
about us
They fill in
too,
the gap.
right?
They have to fill in the gap, right?
They have to fill in the gap. And so there's agency in how we want to show up
Mm.
and how we want to be perceived.
Yep.
Um, and it doesn't have to be, like so strategic, but just thinking about like what kind of person am I
Yeah.
really? What kind of
Yeah.
person am I? And how do I make sure that that person is reflected in
Right.
how I communicate and how
Yep.
I engage in the relationships I build?
Yeah.
Right?
It's very much defining your brand because if you don't, someone else is gonna tell you a story, like define the brand for you. And so I think we have to be much more intentional about everyone's got a brand and that's your reputation. Like if you don't own it or if you don't make sure that you're the one who's curating it, then someone else, other people are chirping and they're gonna fill in those gaps for you.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean that's one of those like the 7 rules of power that Jeffrey talks about is like Jeff Pfeffer talks about is you know self promotion, but also kind of making yourself known and presenting well. As an introvert, do you feel like that's hard, or it's not because you don't have to be necessarily outspoken to like build your brand?
I think it's it's not hard necessarily, but I probably deliberate on it more than somebody else that is
Hmm.
much more accustomed to having themselves out there.
Yeah.
And it's something that I've had to work on, as a muscle, right?
Hmm.
Is to decide, where I want to show up. For instance, even on this podcast,
Yeah.
right? To be able to say, the things that Dave Liu is working on is also important to me and reflective of my values,
Hmm.
and therefore I want to show up here.
Hmm.
And speak to him about these
Hmm.
topics, right? But I'm not going to do that for 15 different topics or 15 different
Yeah.
podcasts. And being selective and being choiceful around that, I think is really important. And so, for me, I think it's probably much more deliberate. And I hope over time, maybe it becomes a lot easier and
Mhm.
natural for me.
Mhm.
But I do think that comes from skewing a little bit more introverted, right? And I'm also, over the years, networking is not a natural, feeling for me either. And I
Yeah.
know, Dave, you talk a lot about that. But what really, I think, unlocked my ability to do that is really shifting from this is like not networking. This
Mhm.
is, the people that I meet all have unique stories and experiences. And every conversation, I either want to learn something that I can take away or I want to give something, right?
Mhm.
I want to give something that I can be helpful with.
Yeah.
I think if you frame it that way, at least for me, that's been really helpful.
Yeah. No, I think the reframing is what I always tell people is like, you can think of it as schmoozy and superficial, this or that, but that's only if you want it to be that way. But if you actually have an intention behind it and you're like, oh, there's actually value in me knowing these folks because it means I can help other people. And there's something that you can be intentional about and mindful of versus, oh, I'm just going to meet people for the sake of meeting people. I'm going to drop names for the sake of dropping names. I'm going to, whatever kind of shallow reasons they might be, there are also meaningful reasons that you can have. And so I think some people, they dismiss networking because they think, oh, I'm not that type of person. It's like, well, are you the type of person that wants to get things done and see the things that you care about accomplished? Well, then you should meet the right people who can help you get that accomplished, right? So it doesn't have to be just for the sake of getting to know people or
Yeah.
whatnot. So it very much is like a reframing of that. And so I guess I want to get to the CEO. Like once you finally got the CEO role, like was that something that you again like last time that you asked for, or was that something that was just given to you because the COO you were already COO and it was kind of inevitable that you would become CEO?
I asked for it.
Mm-hmm.
In the sense that I felt like a lot of the things that I was already doing, um, was part of the CEO role already, um, which gave me confidence as well that I was already delivering
Mm-hmm.
against what the role was. And having those open conversations and being able to also being very open to saying, if there are gaps here, or there are things that you need to
Mm-hmm.
see. And the situation at the time was also challenging, right? We were in the middle of turning around Tinder, and that
Mm-hmm.
wasn't going to be a quick thing. It was going to be something that would require time and
Mm-hmm.
investment. um and so that was something that had to be an open, active conversation. I do think that, being able to create the continuity internally because of all my history at the company and all the learnings and the relationships that were built over, many, many years was a huge strength, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that people who are in positions where they've been able to build upon, the assets that they've established over time. I guess that can be a huge advantage
Yeah.
for a lot of folks,
Yeah.
if they're able to have those open conversations too.
Yeah. Um, and so I'm curious, like, what surprised you most about the role of being CEO that you did not expect?
I think so much of being a CEO is related to people and the team.
Mm.
Um, y- Obviously, there's the vision, right? And where are we going to go? And how are we going to get there? And where are we going to make investments? But I knew this before, but I really believe this now is that a vision and a strategy is nothing without the team, right? The
Mhm.
team that is aligned to that, the team that's motivated
Mhm.
and inspired by the CEO, right? Inspired by that vision, and all of that has to be very deliberate, right? It's
Mhm.
not, hey, the team is just gonna like get in line and
Right.
like, do everything I say,
Yeah.
I asked them to
Yeah.
do.
Here's your playbook. Go execute it. Yeah.
Exactly. Nobody, I mean, think about you when you were working. Like, did
Yeah.
that motivate you? Would
Yeah.
that motivate you? Would that inspire you? Would that
Yeah.
make you put in the extra 2 hours at
Mhm.
night,
Mhm.
after you put your kids to bed? I don't
Yeah.
think it would, right?
Yeah.
So, that dynamic that, at least for now, we employ humans, right? And those humans need to be inspired and motivated. And that doesn't come just because you say, here's the great vision.
Yeah.
There's so much work around that to be able to bring the people together, to even communicate that vision over and over and
Yeah.
over again, so many times,
Yeah.
right? Um, and when people feel aligned to the direction you're going in, things work, right? Things
Yeah.
things get into that flow state. And when it's not, then there's more that you got to work on.
Hmm. And then do you feel like I guess I'm curious as as an Asian American like female CEO who there aren't many of, did you feel an additional burden because you were getting asked to speak at things and I know it reminds me always of, Jeremy Lin, and he's like, I don't want to be the Asian American basketball player. I just want to play basketball. Like, it's kind of annoying that everyone always labels you as that. But I mean, did you find that there was a burden of, because he's like, he didn't want the burden of representing a whole, like,
I
community,
know.
as the one basketball player that's out there. And it actually made him play more poorly because he had so much pressure on him. Like, did you
Yeah.
feel like that burden on you?
I did feel the burden. But it's almost like it's a privileged burden,
Mm.
right? And I go and think back and I say I was inspired by Connie Chung, and
Mm-hmm.
there was only one of her,
Mm-hmm.
right? And w- this gets better when there are more than like
Yeah.
one of her,
Yeah.
right? And so if you look at the Fortune 500, I think there's only three or four CEOs of Fortune 500 companies who are Asian women, right? So it's obviously it's under 1%,
Yeah.
which is nothing.
Abysmal. Yeah. It's abysmal. Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And so, you take that responsibility very seriously. When I left Tinder 3 months ago, the number of people who wrote me and said um, they were just incredibly inspired by seeing an Asian female CEO, or seeing how I led, or being able to navigate, a really complex situation, was more than I would have ever expected,
Mm-hmm.
like, truly more than
Yeah.
ever I would have expected, and it was just another one of those moments where you say, "Oh, like, this does matter,"
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It does matter, and it's important.
Yeah.
Now, with that said, into your example of Jeremy, you can't let it get to the point where it impacts your performance or your well-being, and
Yeah.
that can be hard, right?
Mhm.
At me stepping down as the Tinder CEO was really hard because there aren't that many
Mhm.
female CEOs in tech, and to kind of step away from that was really challenging. But at the same time, at that point, I knew it was the right thing for me to
Mhm.
do at that moment in time.
Mhm.
And I knew that I had made a really positive impact,
Mhm.
and I would continue to make that impact, right?
Yeah.
But it might look different,
Right.
and that was very important for me to internalize
Yeah.
before making that change. But certainly, I think that you know many people, yourself included, Dave, right? Um, you're paving the way for the next generations of folks to come, and it's a real privilege to do that.
Yeah. No, I completely agree, and I think once you lean into that, now that Jeremy's been through that and he sees, I think he's once we did the documentary and he saw the response and how many he understood the impact he had on people, he realized how important, like the privilege that he has now of being that ambassador and kind of that person who's inspired so many people that didn't think that anything like this stuff was possible before. Um, and even meeting, I mean, it's funny when I met Connie Chung, and I told her, I was like, and she told me, she's like, I had no idea that until she met all the Connies, that one,
Yeah,
she had no idea that anyone cared what she was. Cause she's like, oh, I thought I was washed up and like, no one cared until I realized, wow, people, it did matter. What I did matter. And it's crazy to think that someone like Connie Chung does not
I
realize
know.
the impact that she had on people all over, all the girls named Connie and everyone else. I mean, look how many anchors there are that are Asian women now. It's like, that literally was because of you, that people believed that was possible. But I think that even the ones who are the first, they don't realize it when they're in it because they're not thinking about that. Like Jeremy said,
They are.
he's like, I'm not. I'm just trying to to
do my
survive and do my
job. Like,
job.
I'm
Yeah.
doing my job, right?
Yeah.
I'm trying to, like, do what I was meant to do, or, like,
Yeah.
that I'm responsible for,
Yeah.
and the burden is that there is this other thing that's happening, and it's a positive thing, right?
Yeah.
And, to recognize it, and to see it, and it brings more meaning to the work as
Mhm.
well, right? When
Mhm.
you recognize that,
100%. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And so as we come to that part of it, that chapter, the next chapter, what is next for you and what does that look like?
Yeah. As I mentioned, stepping away was really hard. And part of that challenge is what we talked about at the beginning, right? I think growing up as Asian Americans who were meant to either become a doctor or lawyer, an engineer, these paths that were set, um, making decisions where the future is uncertain doesn't feel natural.
Mhm.
And that to me was something I considered, and I'm taking the leap anyways.
Mhm.
And what's this time is allowing me to do is actually just explore,
Mhm.
and decide on the risks that I want to take. Whether that's a bet on myself or a bet with other people.
Mhm.
Um, but this time to rediscover, the things that are happening, the landscape's changing so
Mhm.
quickly. Where are those opportunities, and what problems do I want to solve
Mhm.
now? That's what I'm spending my time doing, and it's really great. And you can't do that
When
when
you're
you are working full
working.
time. You can't do
100%.
that when
Yeah.
you are the CEO,
Yeah.
the company, because your responsibility is to that enterprise, right? To the
Yeah.
people, to the enterprise. And so I am so grateful to be able to take this time and to
Yeah.
do this now.
And it's funny because I'm pretty sure even though you're financially stable, your parents are still worried that you don't have that job. Is like, I feel like that's the reason why we can't take breaks because our parents will think we're crazy for not being employed and having an income. So, I mean, yeah, I love that you're doing that because I think more people need to hear that and they need to know that there doesn't have to you don't have to have a bird in hand all the time. Like you can actually let go of something and trust that. I mean, if you built up this whole resume and your whole career, you'll probably find something again. But if you're always playing from a point of fear, like I need to get another job, otherwise I'll never get a job. I feel like that's that scarcity mindset we get ingrained in us that makes us play from a position of fear and scarcity.
Yeah. Look, I think so many of us have incredible experiences. And in the same way we like overestimate that people think about us or are critical of us, we underestimate, the value of
Yeah,
those experiences.
yeah.
We don't put enough, weight on
Mm-hmm.
them. But so many people that I know, right, who would say, "Oh, well, I haven't achieved very much." And you're like, "What are you talking about?
Yeah,
Like, look at everything that you've
yeah,
done."
yeah.
Um, just also need to be reminded of that. And it's you're right that I'm lucky to be able to do this. And my parents, my mom and my father has passed away, but my mom, is like, "Ah, what about health insurance?"
That is always the first question. Yeah, they're very
um,
practical though. Yeah,
they're very practical. They're very practical. Um, but at the same time, I do believe that as you grow in age and experience, um, success is actually defined by so much more than what your title is and your job and your
mm-hmm,
role, right?
mm-hmm.
And I think it's very easy for us and for our parents to see that as success because it's measurable. It's
Yeah,
very, very measurable, and
yeah,
it's very, very comparable,
yeah,
right? Meaning, oh, well, you have this car and she
yeah,
has that
yeah,
car, and I know what those cost. Therefore,
yeah.
I'm going to like make inferences.
Yep,
You have this house and he has that house. I can go on Zillow and find
yeah,
out how much they cost.
yeah.
And so we use that as an easy proxy,
Mm-hmm.
right, for success or for achievement, when in fact there are so many other factors, and I believe that we don't talk about them enough,
100%.
like whether it's community, right?
Yep.
Like what we're trying to build,
Yeah.
community and the value you get from that, or your relationships, or the freedom to be able to choose to do what you want to
Mm-hmm.
do. we don't have a unit value for those
Mm-hmm.
things.
Mm-hmm.
And because we don't have a unit value for it, we can't actually say I am rich in that,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
In the same way. And
Yeah.
and and that's something that I hope more and more people, especially folks who've grown up in households and cultures like ours, can really think about too.
Yeah. No, I thank you for saying that because I think I I don't know. I feel like all the awards, titles, jobs, like degrees we have, I don't know that it's not like I don't care about those things, but to what end, like, what do I do with all those that I can do now to impact more people? And I feel like at this age, I feel more rewarded that, when I get an email from someone like you got from folks or messages from people that you actually impacted them or inspired them or whatnot. And there's no monetary value to that necessarily, but
No.
I feel like, wow, this gives me purpose. It makes it so much more, rewarding knowing that. And it's like, well, people say, well, that doesn't pay the bills. I'm like, well, you can figure out ways that you can figure out how to pay the bills. But I feel like that like fills me up and fills my cup to do more and want to do more and keep going. But on the flip side, it's like I look at my boys and I want them to be proud of, their dad and what he, I'm trying to do for them as well. Um, but it's very different than when we're younger trying to accumulate stuff and money and cars and houses. It's like, I don't know, when you get to the other side of that, it's and again, I don't want to um you know make small, like, people need to pay the bills and take care of them, and
Yeah.
we're lucky that we have figured that part out for ourselves. But I do think that too many people are hung up on that, because I know many people I know billionaires that are not fulfilled, and so it doesn't, even accumulating all that stuff on the other end doesn't make you fulfilled. Like, you still have to find your purpose, because once you're done with those jobs, like, what do you have? Then you feel complete emptiness if you don't figure out your mission and your purpose. So um but I hope you have, you're figuring all that stuff out now. And I feel like those messages to you on how you inspired so many people, I think there's even more out there that you'll never hear, but hopefully after this episode, you will hear
No.
more. But, I mean, I think this is why you're spending the time to give back the things you've learned to other folks in
Yeah.
your same position that feel stuck in their lives, younger people who didn't realize that you could be an Asian woman running like a big tech company that everyone's heard of. But I think that's why this is so important. The work that we do, not for salary or equity or whatnot. It's still super rewarding, and I thank you for inspiring me and many others, but for taking the time to chat with me
Of
today,
course.
because you gave so many amazing insights to, I think, people that will really, really value them and hopefully apply them in their own careers.
No, thank you for creating the space for your friends and peers to have these types of conversations. I think I've listened and I've learned so much from folks that you've had on. And so thank you for giving me the opportunity to share. This has been great. And so I think many of us have you to thank for creating this space that's needed.
Thanks, Faye. Well, that's the end of this episode, and hopefully I'll see you sooner rather than later, maybe down in LA, or if you have come up here.
West Covina. No, I'm not in
Let's go.
West Covina
No, no,
anymore.
no. I know you're not there anymore. We know you're not still in West Covina, but yeah, let's hopefully we'll see each other soon.
That would be great.
All right, thanks, Faye.
Thanks, Dave.
Have a great weekend. Bye bye.
You too. Okay.
All right, I'll stop here. Thanks for listening to this episode of Hyphen Nation. Please subscribe to my Substack at www.davelou.com and follow us on Instagram at the Hyphen Nation and LinkedIn at Hyphen Nation.